Hey Light Shiners, welcome to the channel. So today we're going to talk about guardianship versus adoption. What's better for the child, what's better for the family, what's better for everyone overall. So today we're going to cover 5 differences between guardianship and adoption. So starting off, adoption is permanent. Right now, as it stands, there's no way for an adoptee or an adoptive parent to annul an adoption. In some states, you can get an annulment if the adoption has been finalized, but 9 times out of 10, if the adoption papers have been drawn, the decree is done, it's finalized, you're pretty much stuck with that child, and that child is stuck with you for the rest of their lives. Adoption annulment is something that I talk about a lot on TikTok. Please follow me on TikTok. And it's something that's like really close to my heart, you know. Being an adoptee who desperately wants my biological family back on my birth certificate. And we're going to get back there. Now, there are other ways for you to rehome an adoptee or to disturb or disrupt an adoption. We're going to talk about that in a different video. So if you want to learn more about that, just look up rehoming an adoption or disrupted adoption. But I will have another video about that. Now, on the other hand, we have legal guardianship. Legal guardianship, well, you know, there are 2 different types of guardianship. If it's legal guardianship, you've gone through the state, you've gone through the courts to obtain legal guardianship. I highly suggest that, especially if you're looking towards adopting or being a guardian. And then you have guardianship, which is kind of like sometimes parents can just sign away guardianship to another person. I do not like that because it's unregulated. A lot of children end up in sex trafficking that way, and it's just a way to disappear children. So legal guardianship is the way to go if you're looking at guardianship, which I highly suggest. So the reason I like guardianship is that it's temporary. It allows you to take care of a child and parent that child without making life-changing decisions like changing a birth certificate. I'm also going to make another video about changing the birth certificate. But yeah, legal guardianship is a way also for you to allow the child to give informed consent. A lot of people on TikTok or online think I hate adoption, and I don't hate adoption. I think sometimes it is very much needed. I hate the idea of telling or putting children in places where they did not have any consent or any hearsay or any voice over themselves. It's literally taking their voice, you know? So that's one of my problems with adoption. Another thing is just that it's permanency, which we talked about earlier. So the second thing about adoption is the biological parents, when an adoption happens, that means TPR. TPR is termination of parental rights. TPR happens and legally the biological parents have no rights and they have no obligations over that child. So, you know, if you're an adoptive parent, you can't get child support, you can't ask for help, and you're kind of on your own. You also don't qualify for a lot of government assistance that wards of the state do. And if you do a guardianship, especially if you're doing a guardianship over a ward of the state, they maintain their housing, therapy, stipends, all of the benefits that comes with being a ward of the state. Now, on the flip side, with guardianship, if you're doing a guardianship, there's a lot of agreements that you can do. You can ask for child support from the biological parents. You can expect them to help pay for some of like school supplies, just things, living expenses that their child, because it's still their child. Even in adoption, that's why I say it's always going to be their child, but guardianship really concretes the fact that that's their child. And if they do their family plan, if they get their life together, or even if they want, because some parents just want guardianship. Some parents don't think that they want to be a parent. But they still want to be in their child's life. Guardianship is the way to go. And, you know, even after, I think a lot of kids, I think in most states, the age of consent to give to adoption is like 9 to 14. I think 14 is a good age for a child to make a decision, even though, you know, I think that it should be very informed. They should talk to people like me who've been there, who've had lived experience, so we can let them know, like, here's the lowdown on what to expect with your adoption. And if they still choose to go through, you know, I think at that case, you should have a radical adoption. A radical adoption is just like an extremely open adoption where you're just co-parenting with the biological families. So let's move on to point 3. This one was one that affected my life that I didn't think that it would. So when you are adopted, you are legally your adoptive parent's child. So if there's any type of inheritance or any type of estate that's left after their death, just like their biological children, you are included in that inheritance unless they directly write you out. I know my adoptive parents were pretty wealthy. I'm not sure what they're doing with their inheritance. I'm almost positive they are not. I'm not in it. But if they don't specifically write me out of the inheritance, I can then sue and ask for my portion. Now, on the flip side, when you are adopted and you aren't in a guardianship situation, well, let me restart. On the flip side, if you're in a guardianship situation, you clearly don't inherit anything because you're not legally that person's child, but you also still are legally your parent's child. So this is very important for a couple of reasons. End of life plans are something that a lot of people don't prepare for. If you don't have a living will, if you're not prepared, if you don't have life insurance, please go do that today after watching this video. But that affected me because when my mother and my sister died, since I was adopted and I wasn't a ward of the state or in a guardianship situation, I no longer had any legal rights over their end of life plans because I wasn't their legal next of kin. Even though that was my blood, that was my mother, that was my sister, I was not their legal next of kin. I did still have to pay for their funeral. I didn't have to because I wasn't legally obligated, but you know, that's my mother and my sister. I am going to do what I can to make sure that they at least have peace in their final resting place. But it's kind of like adoptees get the shit end of the stick because I'm now out of my inheritance, if there is any, with my adoptive parents, and I can no longer make any legal decisions for my biological family. And if my biological family had any inheritance, my mom had insurance and it got split between my two brothers. I didn't receive any. And at that point we were at odds, so they didn't offer me any either. So you can understand how that can start cause animosity between siblings. So that's point 4, like end of life plans, inheritance, there's benefits and there's negatives to both, but at the end of the day, I support legal guardianship because on the flip side with adoption, if you were the legal guardian and you wanted them to inherit something from you, you can just write them into your will. You don't have to adopt them. So that's why I think legal guardianship is the better option. Let's go to the next point. All right, and finally, the last point, point 5. This is probably the most important and overlooked, is with an adoption, once the adoption happens, once it's finalized after your visitation period, which is usually about 6 months, there's no supervision. My adoptive agent came maybe 3 or 4 months after my adoption. After that, I didn't see her again for years. So there's no supervision. There's no one overlooking the adoptive parents, making sure that they aren't being abusive emotionally, physically, financially. There's no oversight. There's no supervision because legally you're their child, and we all have this rose-colored ideal of adoption and thinking like, oh, these people are all good people. No, bad people adopt too. And I think that's very important to remember and to understand. Bad people adopt too. So on the guardianship side, there is oversight. There are caseworkers, there's CASA workers, the child who's a ward of the state still has a family attorney, and probably most likely even in guardianship, they have some type of social worker. So there will always be oversight with guardianship. You just don't end up disappearing into the abyss. Like I said earlier, a lot of foster youth end up missing and end up sex trafficked because one, they get adopted out, or they have some type of illegal, or it's legal, but shady guardianship transference, or they're rehoming them with pedophiles. So there's no oversight. So legal guardianship is the way to go because of the oversight. And once the child is old enough to make the decision, like I said, they can give informed consent to be adopted. So there are way more differences between adoption and guardianship. These are just the 5 that most people ask about. I hope that you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to be making more of these videos, educational videos, and just little tips and tricks when it comes to adoption. I guess not tricks, because we're not pets. But just more tips and advice when it comes to adoption and foster care and what's good and what's not, and what's good and what's not based on my lived experience. So make sure you are subscribed. Please click the little button. I don't know where it's at. I haven't done YouTube in so many years. This is my first YouTube video, I think, in 3 years. I haven't done YouTube in so long, but I hope I'm not that oily. Girl, you oily. I hope I'm not that squeaky. No, I hope I'm not that rusty. I was looking for that. All right. So please subscribe. Follow me on all my social media. Right now, y'all know I'm a little wacky with social media, but right now my TikTok is Water the State. Also, if you want more lived experience about foster care and adoption, I have a podcast called Wards of the State. I will put the links down below and the details of this episode so you guys can follow that. I interview adoptees and former foster youth, and I just listen to them, to their lived experience. And, you know, because foster care and adoption is not a monolith, and we all have different experiences, and we can learn from everyone's experience. So, yeah, and if you want to be on the podcast, there's a link in my bio on my social media that you can fill out a form, come on the show, give your lived experience, and other than that, y'all know what I always say all the time, every time. Always shine your light.